Hymns House, episode 42. My name is Jonathan Stern. I'm here as always with Patrick Lester, who goes by the name Bayside in the Hymns House Discord. We're joined today by Shaun Noorian, founder and CEO of Empower Pharmacy, the largest compounding pharmacy in the world. Empower is headquartered in Houston, Texas, owns both 503A and 503B compounding facilities, recently expanded to New Jersey, where they acquired a 170,000 square foot manufacturing site, and is at the center of perhaps the most consequential GLP-1 lawsuit to date, Eli Lilly versus Empower. Shaun Noorian, welcome to Hymns House.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So as I mentioned in the intro, Empower is the largest compounding pharmacy in the world. What else should we know? What kind of medicines are you compounding most today? And who do you sell to? Is it physicians, other pharmacies, clinics, or do you guys have a D2C direct-to-consumer side as well?
Yeah, so we kind of stay away from the D2C side. As far as Empower, we're more or less a fully integrated, vertically integrated pharmaceutical manufacturing organization that can touch every single pharmaceutical end user, both B2B and B2C in the entire country. And so, we were founded to fix what's broken in healthcare. And this new model that we're building, that of course HIMSS is contributing to, is making sure that personalized medicine is more accessible, affordable, and manufactured or compounded with the same rigor as large-scale pharmaceutical operations would be. So, the mission is simple: restore the relationship between patient and provider by enabling treatments that actually meet individual needs, not one-size-fits-all formulations that big pharma shoves down all of our throats. And what sets us apart isn't just scale. It's really intent. While most of the system is optimized for shareholder value, we're optimized for patient outcomes and practitioner autonomy, which ends up resulting in better shareholder value. And by manufacturing and compounding sterile and non-sterile medications under the highest quality standards, all in-house, all vertically integrated, and we do this at scale and sophistication that very few in the compounding space have even attempted. So what we built kind of hasn't existed before. We saw gaps in care, and we didn't wait for someone else to try to fix them. So by investing in infrastructure, compliance, quality, automation, all from the ground up, we built by building the most advanced 503B and largest, most advanced 503A in the country, capable of 24/7 sterile production at the highest pharmaceutical grade standards. That creates an operational foundation of trust that then helps fuel our growth.
So I want to start with GLP-1s, which many people in the community are thinking about, many HIMSS investors are thinking about. Of course, the end of the semaglutide shortage came in February. After, I think it was May 22nd, 503Bs were not allowed legally to continue to produce compounded semaglutide. So I want to start with something that's generated some buzz online, which is that dozens of Reddit users and a few connected industry sources as well are speculating that 503B pharmacies are ramping up GLP-1 production for the first time since the shortages ended. I think they're saying mainly tirzepatide, but also semaglutide. Empower has not been among the 503Bs said to be doing this, but I'm curious to hear, have you heard about these rumors? And if so, what's your take?
Yes, I have heard about these rumors. And, I've been digging into them over the past couple of weeks. And I think I figured out what it actually is. But first off, it's not difficult for 503Bs to ramp up production. And that's what we're here for. When a drug goes off on back order, especially a drug that we've been making before and have stability studies in place, if the administration announced that GLP-1s could be now made by 503Bs again, we would make them the very next day, just like every other 503B would. So that's something important to consider. But
literally the next day, you'd be online
within a week. We'd have to see what's currently on the schedule and then move them into other slots. Of course, something like a GLP-1 is much more profitable and much more in demand than many of the other 70 sterile products that we manufacture. So we could easily move one of the other sterile products and just throw this one in there within a few days. So, but what I think is actually going on is we have a couple 503Bs that were only making GLP-1s. And pretty much as soon as GLP-1s came off back order, 503Bs could no longer make it. They lost 100% of their revenue, practically, and pretty much went out of business. What we're seeing is that these 503Bs are going out and telling the public that they can order again, and we're stocking up, and you can start ordering come next week. But it's actually through a 503A that they've partnered with or developed, licensed on their own. So these are indicative, right? You can see they're saying we've combined it with other active ingredients, to
I think I've seen B6 and B12. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And, also, by the way, instead of sending us orders, send us patient names and dates of births. Send us prescriptions and we'll get it filled to you just like we used to. Like, well, that's a 503A. That's a compounding pharmacy. That's not an outsourcing facility. So I think it's just a way of them trying to trick their previous clients into sending business back towards them instead of continuing to sending it to the current 503As that they're doing business with.
Okay, so let's say the rumors are true. It seems like you're on board with the rumors that some of the 503Bs are doing this now. Are they allowed to do this?
So 503Bs are not allowed to make GLP-1s, hard stop, period, except under a time of shortage. And so the only way they would be able to make them again is if semaglutide and or tirzepatide went back on shortage, which there is no indication that is going to happen.
And you're saying right now it's 503B manufacturing the GLP-1, selling it to 503As, who are then selling it to the end consumer. Is that your sense of what's going on?
Well, 503Bs can't make GLP-1s outside of shortage. So whether they're selling it to a 503A or selling it to a practitioner, a med spa that then is administering those GLP-1s to their patients in office, 503Bs cannot do any of that unless GLP-1s are on shortage. So either the administration would have to say that they're on shortage, which there is no indication that that's going to happen, or an executive order would have to be put out making GLP-1s on shortage, which, that may happen, but there's also still no guarantee that's going to happen. And, Trump laid out his favored nation pricing executive order, a week or two ago, and gave the manufacturers 60 days to comply. Some people are saying maybe 503Bs will be the solution if the pharmaceutical manufacturers don't come to the table and lower their pricing. Then there is one legal avenue for lower pricing for competition, other competitors to enter the market. 503Bs. We already exist. We're FDA registered. We're licensed in all 50 states. We have capacity. So, I see that's maybe one way, but that's not going to happen in the next week. That's going to happen, about 50 days from now. So I think the rumors are more true that 503Bs that were selling GLP-1s are simply just doing it as 503As.
And they're operating outside the law. Do you think they'll get shut down? Do you have any? Well,
I don't think they're doing it. They're just saying they're doing it and tricking people into ordering from them again, whereas they're actually just a 503A.
Okay.
No 503B would make these drugs. They would get shut down immediately.
Okay. All right. Yeah, there's been a tremendous amount of discussion on this topic, so that clears it up more than I've heard so far. Thanks for that. I'll turn it over to you, Patrick, with I think some more FDA questions.
Yeah, so that was very interesting. So I want to spin off some comments that came on our last podcast from a former FDA official who was critical of HIMSS and of the compounding industry and participated in a briefing up on Capitol Hill, trying to draw attention by members of Congress and also from the FDA, urging them to essentially crack down on what's happening currently. And so I'm going to used some of the language that was really attributed to our former guest, not to me. So some of the things that they've said are that Hims and others are what they're doing post shortage when it comes to personalized compounding is illegal. It's phony personalization. It's skirting FDA laws, and it's putting patients at risk. Again, those are not my comments. Those are those of our former guest. So one of the reasons why we wanted to get you on the show was really to hear the other side of that. I think we got a little bit of pushback from some in our community. They felt that last one was a little one-sided. So this is our attempt to get an alternative view on that. So tell us about compounding and personalization and why you think they're critical.
Absolutely. So compounding has been around before Big Pharma existed. Only 100 years ago, 75% of all medications dispensed in this country were compounded. And so compounding is nothing new, and it has more rules and regulations around it than almost any other industry out there, especially for compounders that are making sterile drugs that are destined to be injected into people. Now, fast forward today, only 3% of all drugs dispensed in our country are compounded. And Big Pharma would like that 3% to go down to zero, because then they have complete exclusivity over the market on their terms. Well, that's not the way things work, unfortunately, for them. It's really a doctor's decision what is in his or her patient's best interests. And if that doctor or practitioner believes that combining two medications together is better than just having one, or changing that dosage strength of that medication so the patient has to inject less, or putting it in a different dosage form like a multi-dose vial so the patient can draw back exactly the amount of medication they need instead of a single dose use pen that is currently on the market for some GLP-1s. And if the doctor believes that a patient can better benefit from a compounded, personalized version of a medication, then they can write that prescription and send that medication to a compounding pharmacy like ourselves. So while Big Pharma, can say that compounding is dangerous and illegal and counterfeit and all these things that are completely untrue, that obviously would benefit them if they could believe the populace that they were true. Compounding has been around for a very long time and can be considered very safe compared to illicit drugs that you can buy through research chemical websites or illegal pharmacies. Now, those, I agree, those are unregulated, and patients should not be acquiring their medications from entities like those. But compounding pharmacies are highly regulated. We're licensed in every single state that we ship medications to. We have the FDA coming in our doors, DEA, making sure that we meet the rules and regulations required when it comes to making quality medications under either Section 503A or 503B. So, yeah, I actually see the opposite is true. When a provider sends a patient to a compounding pharmacy, that patient is typically better served than if they were send them to a traditional Walgreens or CVS, where the entire population gets one single pill or one single dose or one single whatever. When they're sending to a compounding pharmacy, our medications are customized, personalized, individualized for what that practitioner believes is in his or patient's best interests. So, yeah, I don't say I agree with your last guest.
Yeah, we didn't expect that you would. I'm going to play devil's advocate and push back slightly, but give you a chance to answer.
Please.
So I think there's some conflating of different things going on. I'll start with history. So one of the reasons why compounders, at least this actually is my read, are actually on solid legal ground is that there was an opening created by a Supreme Court decision made back, and I believe if memory serves, 2002. They were reacting to legislation that was enacted in the late 1990s. And the initial intention of Congress was to limit the amount of personalized compounding that took place, but they chose to do it by saying, you can do this, but you can't advertise it. Well, the Supreme Court knocked that out and said that is an unconstitutional infringement on commercial free speech rights. They told Congress to go back and fix it. Congress never did. In fact, Congress did update the laws, creating much of what you've been talking about around 503Bs and 503As. And still, they left this open because my read on it is they felt that that was a solution in search of a problem that did not exist. But then we got to GLP-1s, and I'll shift back to echoing some of what our previous guest said as opposed to what I'm saying. And suddenly GLP-1s came along, and although I think you said 2 or 3% was the compounding figure, at least in the GLP-1 space, I've seen it alleged that compounders are taking up to 30% of that market. And again, my interpretation of what our former guest said, I felt there was a lot of conflating the work that an organization like yours would do with some of the more illicit folks that are out there, and really wasn't distinguishing the two. So given, some of that was from me in terms of the legal background, in terms of where we are, but also most of it is about responding again to our previous guest. What are 503Bs and 503As supposed to do to ensure that the product that you are creating is in fact appropriate and healthy for those customers?
It's a great question. We spoke a little about the rules and regulations and quality standards that 503As and 503Bs have to meet, and how exceptionally high those standards are, as they should be, and especially here in the United States, where they're stricter than anywhere else in the world. And these rules for 503As are primarily governed by USP, or the United States Pharmacopoeia, which is a publicly recognized standard-setting organization that governs the rules of what compounders can and can't do to ensure that they meet certain quality standards. And then 503Bs are registered with the FDA and governed by CGMP, or Current Good Manufacturing Practices, similar standards to what pharma uses. And so obviously the quality standards for a medication that's the manufacturers of 503B are much higher than the quality standards that are compounded at a 503A. So states typically oversee 503As. They inspect 503As to USP standards, and the FDA oversees 503Bs and inspects 503Bs to CGMP standards. But regardless, both standards are proven and shown to produce safe medicine. If a pharmacy or outsourcing facility can meet those standards, those medications can be considered safe and then can be dispensed or distributed throughout the country.
All right. I know I just added a question that was not on our original list. So thanks for indulging me on that. One really quick question, then I want to get to this case that you've been doing. When Congress, 81 members of Congress issued a letter, I think to the FDA, if I remember correctly, really criticizing some of the bad actors that are out there. One of the things that HIMSS did almost immediately was put out a statement in support of that. Would you say that the legitimate compounders would share a desire to crack down on some of the bad actors that are potentially kind of casting a bad light on everyone?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's very dangerous for patients to be engaging with a website that is unregulated, that is at its core an illegal pharmacy, shipping medications from outside the country into our country, guised as legitimate medications. And many, because they're coming from unregulated sources, there's no assurance that these medications are even medications at all. It could be placebo. It could be a complete different drug. It could be adulterated. It could have heavy metal contaminants. It could be non-sterile. Who knows? No one's ever tested those medications.
We're going to give you more of an opportunity to comment on that. I just wanted that short answer because I think a lot of people are really conflating the two. I want to do a hard shift, and thanks, Jonathan, to take a little extra time there.
No, you're good.
I want to do a hard shift into this case, which I think is important. And for those who do not know about it, we'll give you an opportunity to give a brief description. But basically, Empower is at the center of a pretty high-profile case surrounding GLP-1s. It involves your company, and also Eli Lilly. And so I've got a couple of questions. I'll just read them both off, and you can answer them in whatever way you see fit. So the first question is, can you walk us through the broad strokes of the case? What is it about? Who's suing whom, and for what? Just for the background of those who are not familiar with the case. And then secondly, and this is one that I find particularly interesting, is that I have heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I haven't seen the case, read it specifically. I've heard that you have challenged the tirzepatide patents. Tirzepatide is what Eli Lilly is making that's generic name for it. On what basis are you questioning those patents, assuming it's true? And do those arguments potentially apply to semaglutide as well? So take those questions in whatever order you like.
Sure. Now, let's start with the first one. So regarding the lawsuits between Lilly and us, as well as the commonalities between that and the IPR that we filed, I'd say at both, at their core, they're both about power dynamics. We see a massive pharmaceutical company, the largest in the entire world, is using legal pressure to try and silence a legitimate healthcare provider that's operating within legal rights. And we believe this is just an effort to protect market exclusivity, not patient welfare. And how do we respond to that? We follow the law, period. We don't distribute or dispense medication unless legally compoundable. And every prescription is backed by a licensed provider. Every lot is tested for sterility, potency, endotoxin. If there's ever a mistake, we correct it transparently. And what we don't do is let fear-mongering or strategic lawsuits cloud the facts. So what are the motives behind the legal challenge? I think it's pretty obvious. It's about market control. GLP-1s are a multi-billion-dollar franchise. I believe they've added about $400 billion to Lilly's market capitalization. And as you mentioned, it's estimated that maybe 30% of those prescriptions are compounded. They're not going to Lilly or Novo. You do that math. They're putting hundreds of billions of dollars of market capitalization on the table, and they don't like that. So, but that doesn't mean that what compounders are doing is wrong. Pretty much what I think it means, it's just, they don't want erosion of their monopoly. And so whether through compounding or through generics, it's a threat to the status quo for them. So legal pressure becomes a tool of competitive defense, not justice. Now, when it comes to the IPR, what does that mean? What are we doing about it? So,
and what does IPR mean for those who might not know?
The acronym escapes me right now. It's a way for companies to be able to challenge patents. So if a company thinks that a patent is not valid, they can file an IPR with the USPTO, the United States Patent Trade Office, and then they can go through a process of determining whether or not that patent should have been granted or not. Was it novel? Was it not? Was there prior art? And so this why have we decided to challenge the patent? Well, we believe this patent never should have been granted. It's not protecting true innovation. It's blocking access. And patients should not have to suffer to pay exorbitant prices because of what we believe is an invalid monopoly. So the IPR is about restoring balance between innovation and accessibility. And it also says that we're not afraid to challenge entrenched power on behalf of patients. It says we're willing to stand up to big pharma when patents are being used to restrict access rather than reward innovation. And it also says we see ourselves as a legitimate player, not just in compounding, but in the broader pharmaceutical ecosystem. So the challenge is about accountability, access, and long overdue reform.
All right. I'm going to kick it back to Jonathan.
Just one follow-up on the tirzepatide patent case, because it's so important and the consequences are potentially earth-shattering. Mm-hmm. How long do you expect the case to take? And can you give us a sense of how you're feeling about it?
Yeah, so we should see, as far as timelines, so we filed the IPR back in May. I believe in October, the USPTO director decides on discretionary denial of our petition. If it's not denied, then come December, they will then decide on trial. So we should know hopefully by the end of the year.
Let me just make a quick comment. My understanding, or at least my read, is the reason why for a long time we kept hearing that Novo Nordisk was going to sue HIMSS.
We're still hearing that.
Yeah, we're still hearing that. And I questioned that in an analysis I wrote several months back, and it still hasn't happened. What I expected would be the case is that Hims would have done, and might still do, exactly what you have done with Lilly, and that Novo chose to steer clear of that. That's speculation, but I think that's one of the reasons why we're very interested in your case.
Yeah, I can't say for sure. I'm not Novo. But I think Novo knows they would lose that case, especially because entities like Hims are so well funded that they can actually fight back. And they saw what happened when Lilly sued us. We fought back, So yeah, I think the chances of Novo suing Hims are quite low, especially since, like I said, Novo has seen what happens when a well-funded organization can actually fight back, and not just fight back, but punch that bully in the face way harder than they're trying to punch down on smaller entities like ours. So yeah, I would find it very surprising if Novo sued you guys or the Hims organization.
Yeah,
I'll just add, there's a Kalshi market that's open right now about whether Novo will sue Hims. Last week, the percent chance was hovering around 65, 66%. I think it's either 60% or 59% now that they will sue Hims. The volume is like 16 or 17,000, maybe it's up to 20,000. And so these are small numbers. Some people think that that there are certain Hims investors that are using it as a hedge against their own position. So it may not tell the story about whether Novo will sue Hims, unlike other prediction markets, which really are pretty good. But just noting, I think it's notable that you said the odds are very, very low. We'll see if that moves the market and Hims at all. Let's move to something else with politics, which is that we have a new administration, we have a new head of HHS, and we have a new FDA commissioner, Marty Makary, who used to work for Sesame, a compounder. Head of HHS, of course, being RFK Jr. Were you encouraged or optimistic when both of those people were appointed? What was your first reaction when you saw that they were the new guys?
Oh, I was ecstatic. There have been very few people that have led the agency that understand how to fix our broken healthcare system as well as Bobby Jr. and Dr. Makary do. And both are proponents of compounding. I mean, it's my understanding that both use compounding. They're very familiar with how compounding serves the needs of patients, especially when traditional pharmaceutical manufacturers cannot. And both are very opposed to the big pharma greed. RFK Jr. wrote books on the subject. Dr. Makary, Sesame is an organization that provides medications to patients that can't get them through traditional means. And when it comes to GLP-1s, when only 12% of the US population can get access to GLP-1s at these price points, that's a huge problem. And I think they see compounding as a solution to that problem. And as obviously we do. And the majority of the patients in this population that can't get access through traditional medicines also agree as well. So I think that, in order for us to really fix this broken healthcare system, especially on the pharmaceutical supply chain side, it's going to take entities like Hims and like Empower to then go in and provide options, convenient, compliant, cost-effective options, and then let the market decide what's in their best interests. And with this administration, we're seeing very little pushback on that strategy.
We know that Trump, this may be a question we're going to ask later. We know that Trump is negotiating with Big Pharma. Is it safe to say that you believe that Makary and RFK Jr. are also in Trump's ear advocating for the compounders?
I hope so. I can't say for sure because no one knows what's being whispered in Trump's ears, unfortunately. But I think I don't see another legal avenue for patients or other B2B purchaser of pharmaceutical products in this country to get access to medications outside of big pharma. 503As and 503Bs are the only other legal avenues, as we've seen any attempts at getting drugs imported into this country squashed by big pharma's lobbying efforts. So I hope that they are doing what's in the best interest of patients, which I think they are. And in my opinion, what's in the best interest of patients is competition. I don't think big pharma is going to lower their costs unless there is somebody that's offering a lower cost medication, as we've seen happen with GLP-1s. We saw when tirzepatide and semaglutide, Mounjaro, Ozempic, the manufactured brand name versions of the GLP-1s came out. They came out at $1,000 a month. And then earlier this year we saw Novo cut that price in half. And what happened? The very next month, Lilly did the same exact thing. So unless there are competitors in the market that are willing to lower costs, big pharma will not respond. So I think I'm really grateful for the president to put out these ultimatums to force big pharma to lower their costs. But if they don't, we will see. If they don't, I hope they utilize 503As and 503Bs as alternative channels to be able to get patients access to these life-saving and changing medications.
Great. We touched on the lawmaker letter, the letter from the 81 lawmakers a little earlier. Patrick, did you have another follow-up there or anything?
No, not really. That's fine.
Shaun may have had a couple more words to say about it.
Yeah, I did kind of cut him off. Sorry about that.
I didn't want to say that you cut him off, but it seemed like you might have had a little bit left to say.
Oh, no, I'm very supportive of that letter. We, through our trade organizations, sent similar letters urging the FDA and the president to do whatever is necessary to lower costs. And like I said earlier, I don't think big pharma is going to do it on their own. Unless they are forced to, they are going to continue doing what they do that makes them, and their shareholders very wealthy. So yes, whatever Trump can do to put more attention to this issue and get the drug makers to come to the table, great. Whatever at the end of the day increases patient access, we're in favor for. But if pharma can't do that, great. We can take care of that as well, as I'm sure HIMSS and many other telemedicine compounding companies that utilize compounding pharmacies are doing today. And I think at the end of the day, as long as patients have a choice, which we do much more so thanks to the consumerization of healthcare due to the pandemic, more and more patients are choosing to source their medications through telemedicine, not just at a lower cost point, but with better outcomes, because now they can get access to personalized medication at a fraction of the cost they used to.
All right, one more, and then I'm going to turn it over to Patrick. This is HIMSS House after all, so I want to talk about HIMSS briefly. You are at the helm of a linchpin of the compounding industry, of course, not affiliated with HIMSS. From your perspective, what role has HIMSS played in the industry broadly? What's your take on what Andrew has built over the last 7 or 8 years?
I will say I'm quite impressed with what HIMSS has been able to accomplish over the past 7 years. We haven't seen any company in compounding grow as quickly as HIMSS has been able to do. I think y'all did 69% increase in revenue last year. You beat us by 1%. So well done. It's just amazing.
I don't think we get to take credit.
We're not affiliated with HIMSS, just investors. But yes.
Oh yeah, the crew at HIMSS has done an amazing job doing that. And the way they've been able to do that is by making patients aware that we have options and making those options convenient. And we found that convenience is one of the primary factors when it comes to which patients choose which practitioner organization to send their business to. And so, of course, the Super Bowl commercial, no compounder has ever done that. The amount of lobbying that HIMSS is doing, no compounder has the budget to be able to do that. Our own trade association, we're talking, low 6 figures budget to be able to do this kind of advocacy.
And is that APC or OFA?
Both. And so, you guys put millions of dollars into your lobbying efforts and, hundreds of millions into marketing. Compounders, I think we're like the largest compounder, us. We only put single digit millions into our marketing. So, PIMS is really getting the word out there about how efficacious personalized medication can be and how convenient and cost effective it can be as well. And so, it's what HIMS has built is, I think, a winning equation that is only going to continue to bring more patients in the door.
Great. Patrick, over to you.
Okay, well, so that question was obviously HIMS related. Then this next one is sort of HIMS related, but I'm really asking about your broader industry knowledge here. So looking forward, a lot of our conversation up until this point is really focused on GLP-1s and the legal train and so forth, and that's very here and now. But the real interest, I think, for HIMS is really forward directed. And so I want to ask about some of the categories that they have signaled that they are potentially interested in moving into, some of it this year, some of it perhaps in the next year or two, and just get your take based upon your knowledge on what might be evolving in these categories. So they are, first and foremost, and I think this might come in the current quarter or maybe the next one, an expansion into testosterone and hormone replacement therapy. Another category, which is much bigger, it has all sorts of potential, and we have a different guest coming on the pod in the near future, and that's peptides more broadly. GLP-1s are a form of peptide, but there are potentially other uses. A third one is longevity supplements, one that I have an interest in. I'm being a little older, perhaps, than the both of you. Love to see that come together. And a fourth is maybe seems a little more mundane, but it's an important thing, which is sleep. There's probably others out there as well. I'm curious, given what you know about the industry and what's out there, where's the prospect for growth and change that might be exciting around any of those categories from your point of view?
Well, I think there's definitely growth in all of them, as we specialize in all the different areas of treatment you just mentioned. When it comes to hormone replacement therapy, absolutely, that is the core of every single age management and longevity protocol. Testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, cortisol, growth hormone. These are hormones that we naturally produce in our body, but tend to decline due to either age or comorbidity disease states taking place. So for sure, hormone replacement is integral for the growth plan. Now, when it comes to peptides, there's so many peptides. All peptides are a chain of amino acids. And there are ones that are legal, and there are ones that are not legal. Compounding pharmacies can only make drugs that have been FDA approved at some point. There are a lot of peptides out there that have never been approved. But we do see some of the smaller players making these peptides because, they're smaller, they can fly under the radar. But larger publicly traded players, I don't think they can sell illegal drugs. But there are some legal peptides like Sermorelin that have been FDA approved. I think that's where we see our partners, the ones that are doing it compliantly, that are starting with. And then when it comes to longevity, there are lots of drugs out there, rapamycin, also known as sirolimus, that NAD+, that are gaining lots of popularity amongst people that want more energy, want to potentially increase their telomeres and reduce inflammation, and improve mitochondrial function. So for sure, we see longevity being a growth path in our company. And then sleep. Who doesn't sleep? And who sleeps? How many of us sleep perfectly? I don't. I need a lot of help to get those 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep. And so whether it's pharmaceutical or supplements, absolutely. Sleep is definitely a way that, as we see, it's part of the 5 pillars of health: diet, exercise, stress reduction, biomarker optimization, which is kind of what we specialize in with the hormones and other medications, but then sleep, and without that 5th pillar, I mean, you're not going to be as optimized as you could be. So I think addressing all 5 of those areas is the best way to fully optimize a human being.
All right. Jonathan.
I'll just say, interesting that you mentioned Sermorelin. I don't know enough about peptides. One of the reasons that I think it's next week we're having a peptide expert on the podcast, but one of our past guests, Antonio Linares, reached out to me several weeks ago mentioning Sermorelin. So I'm just going to make a mental note of that and be sure to ask our peptide expert a lot about that. Real quickly, what does Sermorelin do, if you don't mind sharing?
Sure. So Sermorelin is a growth hormone releasing hormone mimetic. So it mimics natural GHRH that our hypothalamus produces to then tell our pituitary gland to secrete and release growth hormone. And by injecting that, by administering that to a patient, we're simply adding more of that signal to that patient's pituitary gland. There are other ways to release growth hormone. There's one other pathway to release growth hormone, and that is through ghrelin. Ghrelin is what's known as the hunger hormone. So your stomach secretes ghrelin, which then tells your body to get hungry, but also happens to tell your body, your pituitary gland, to release growth hormone. So Sermorelin is just one type of the medications out there, growth hormone releasing hormone mimetics, that can cause the release of growth hormone.
Great. So let's move into the final part of the interview. The last time, the last show with Peter Pitts, we ended the discussion by asking him to give us a percent chance on the odds of a percent chance that various things happen that would be impactful to HIMSS and other compounders, and of course the share prices and market capitalizations of all of these companies. And I'd like to go through a similar exercise with you if you're open to it. A little background first. Trump has been pushing hard to lower drug prices. We've covered that already. He recently sent those 17 letters to the big pharma companies, including Lilly and Novo. Last week, Lilly announced it would raise prices in the UK as a way of bringing down prices in the US under Trump's most favored nations pricing policy. The move has fueled speculation, and I know, Bayside, you've talked about this on Twitter, that big pharma might give the administration what it wants in exchange for tougher enforcement on compounders like HIMSS or Empower. And so again, I want to go through just a list of possible outcomes and have you attach odds or percent chances if you can. It would be great if we could get numbers. I love attaching precise odds to these sorts of things, and I know people in the community do as well. So that's what we'd like to close with, if you're up for it, and then maybe a few follow-ups.
Absolutely. So for that one,
number one is percent chance that we see FDA enforcement in general on compounded GLP-1s before the end of 2025.
Right. If they want FDA to enforce rules of compounding, I mean, the FDA is already doing it. The rules are very clear. They've always been clear. Compounding pharmacies can only produce a drug as long as it's either a component of an FDA-approved drug, has a USP/RNF monograph, or exists in the 503A bulks list, which is a list of drugs that have been grandfathered in that the FDA deems are safe for compounders to make. Well, tirzepatide and semaglutide meet condition number one. They are components of an FDA-approved drug. Now, compounding pharmacies on top of that can only make a drug that is not an essential copy as long as it is either different dosage form, dosage strength, or dosage combination, any one of those three. So as long as compounders are abiding by the rules that the FDA and states use, then we will continue to be able to make any FDA-approved drug as long as it is differentiated from the commercial product. So I think them taking action, I mean, I'd be questioning, like, what is the action that they're going to take? They can't change their rules to make compounders, because if they did say compounders can't make GLP-1s, well then what? So we can't make GLP-1s, but we make every other FDA-approved drug ever made? how they'd have to amend Section 503A of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So I find that highly unlikely. I give that a 5% chance.
I'm going to run through a few options a little later. After
I think that would be helpful. Are you attaching a 5% chance to the that we see expanded FDA enforcement? You're exactly right. There is FDA enforcement. The idea that there's not is is completely detached from reality. But the question is about, I guess, expanded FDA enforcement over and above what's already happening.
I see the FDA expanding their enforcement of illegal actors. These for research use only peptide websites where you can buy drugs, actual drugs, whether they be these unapproved peptides or semaglutide, tirzepatide, or even retatrutide. That drug hasn't even been FDA approved yet.
Which isn't even approved. Yeah, someone in the Discord posted an ad for retatrutide yesterday. I couldn't believe, because is that Lilly's GLP-1?
Yep, right.
That they're paying for studies for.
Right.
And already these illegal actors are selling it.
Yes, I think the FDA is, and already is, putting much more enforcement action on these illegal pharmacies.
Percent chance that we see more enforcement targeted at bad actors before the end of 2025.
Yes, absolutely. That's what's happening right now with these illegal actors.
100%?
100%.
100%.
Okay. It's already happening. We're seeing some of these research use only websites that are providing bacteriostatic water and drugs to patients, but saying, hey, this isn't for human administration. Don't you agree? But obviously they're marketing it, under the radar that it is for human administration. So the agency is taking action already on those.
I think this is worth adding just because there was no clarification in the most recent interview about HIMSS versus the illegal actors. HIMSS was sort of lumped in. I don't know that Peter Pitts actually said that, but the way he made it sound is that HIMSS is the poster child for all of compounding and therefore the bad actors. Is it fair to say that you would distinguish HIMSS from the illegal, really shady actors in the industry?
Yeah, HIMSS doesn't do anything illegal as far as I'm aware. Yeah. There's regulated and unregulated entities. The bad actors we're talking about that they're conflating and are with good actors like ours, regulated entities. So these illegal pharmacies, they'll talk about counterfeit drugs, dangerous drugs. And then in the same sentence, they'll talk about compounding, not saying that compounding is legal. It's not counterfeit. And so it's very confusing. And this kind of messaging is very unfortunate because patients, don't know the nuances of our industry and they believe what they hear on MSNBC. And so when these entities, when these journalists that just happen to be funded, get the majority of their funding from big pharma, they're the largest spend advertiser of any other advertiser out there is big pharma. That's why whenever you turn on a TV, you see a pharmaceutical commercial out there. So, we see these, this is why a lot of this is fake news, unfortunately. When they're talking about compounders and illegal pharmacies in the same sentence, not differentiating two, I think it causes a lot of damage that at the end of the day just puts patients in a very bad situation where they don't know what's actually legal or not.
Yeah, that's really important, and I'm glad you said that. Before I turn it over to Patrick with some more specific questions, the big bear case against HIMSS right now, or one of them, is that there will be a blanket ban on compounded GLP-1s at some point in the next few months. Again, probably related to Trump's push for most favored nations pricing to lower drug prices.
Yeah.
What do you think the percent chance is that there's a blanket ban of compounded GLP-1s before the end of 2025?
Yeah, it's like 0%. I mean, what's the legal pathway to be able to do that? Is it the demonstrably difficult to compound list? Well, that list doesn't exist. And FDA has never added a drug to that list. And so, and if so, why is it demonstrably difficult? I know Novo and Lilly have written massive 100-page white papers, petitioning the FDA, showing them all the science on how these drugs are so hard to make, But compounders, you can make any other drug except for these. Like these, just these two, they are so difficult. No one else can make them except for us. Like, I don't think that's been proven.
They've been producing them throughout the shortage.
Right. Yeah. And
remember that.
And if you look at the data that the FDA just released data on GLP-1s, and through their own words, the FDA said the amount of side effects from GLP-1s made by compounders and pharmaceutical manufacturers are practically identical. One is not really more dangerous than the other. And in many cases, compounders can minimize the negative side effects because most of the side effects are due to dose, the dose being too high. This is why this drug is dose escalated slowly, because if you give a patient too much of a dose too quickly, they'll have side effects, typically nausea or gastroparesis. So with compounders, we can give them vials where the patient can drop just the right amount. Maybe it's 50% less than what the traditional manufacturer has in their single dose pens. And so we actually see, when done properly through a licensed prescriber and overseen such, patients can actually exhibit less side effects than if they were to just inject that next dose that just happens to be 100% larger than their previous dose. So yeah, I don't see the agency taking action on GLP-1s because there's no legal mechanism for them to be able to do so. Yeah. What compounding pharmacies do, and for GLP-1s and every other drug we compound and manufacture as 503Bs, has to meet the rules and regulations, and the rules and regulations are very clear.
Okay, should I jump into some of these questions, Jonathan?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so you kind of got an advance on my first of three questions, and I think I'll have a follow-up too. But before I run down this list of three, and the first one you've kind of discussed already, you are not in any way compelled to agree with what I'm about to say. Earlier this year when I wrote a backgrounder on personalization and the law behind it, it was really based, I really took a very similar approach to the one you just articulated, which is, what does the law actually say? And let's go read that. Not what people think the law should say or what they're assuming the law says, but what the law actually says. And I fell in a place pretty consistent with what you just said. I think some folks in the Discord and potentially online, folks have noticed a shift in tone. So I want to take an opportunity to explain it. It may or may not affect any of your answers, which is this. I felt that it really looked like most favored nation status was a very high priority for this administration. And unlike the most recent administration, the Biden administration, Trump has shown a willingness to lean into the gray areas of the law in an aggressive fashion if he sees it fits some of the policies he's trying to do. So whereas in the past, I would have said, what does the law say? And what is the FDA likely to do given its past history? More recently, I've been biased in favor of some kind of deal being cut, and that this administration is more likely to aggressively interpret the law in the way that best suits their goals, as opposed to just deferring to whatever the FDA. In fact, one of the things that our previous guest, Peter Pitts, said at the very end of that interview was, his experience with FDA says that, because we asked him a very similar question in terms of about Makary and RFK Jr., and his advice was, this administration should just listen to what the professionals have to tell them, that someone in his position was to certainly flag things that were potentially controversial, but he advised that the FDA should stand strong and just tell them this is where we should be based on the law. As soon as I heard that as a political person, I said, that is not the way this administration is working. The role seems to me to have flipped, and it's the job of the FDA to do what the White House tells them to do, not the other way, not the job of the FDA to tell the White House what they're going to do. It's a very different dynamic. That may or may not influence your answers to these questions, but let me run through the three. The first one, again, you already answered, but I'll just, for the sake of background, what is the percent chance, and I think you already answered this, that the FDA will finalize? Let me give a slight background for those who may not know it. This so-called too difficult to compound list is tied to a regulation that was put out there last year in preliminary form Enough time has passed for folks to submit comments and so forth. And right now, if they were to pursue this angle, first, they would have to finalize a regulation, which has not happened yet. And then they would have to choose to add GLP-1s to this so-called too difficult to compound list. And even if they did do these things, which they have not done, the FDA could potentially be sued to stop this from happening. So with all that background being said, knowing that this regulation has not been finalized yet, what is the % chance in your view that the FDA will finalize this regulation and add GLP-1s to the list?
Yeah, like close to zero.
Close to zero, which is what you said a second ago.
There's no, first off, GLP-1s have been proven easily to be compoundable, not demonstrably difficult to compound. We've been making, millions of doses, and, patients, just as the FDA has released in their most recent report that they released on their website about a week ago, they show that there are just as many adverse events reported to the federal adverse event reporting system for compounding pharmacies as there are for mass manufactured drugs. So yeah, I don't think you can scientifically make a case that these chemicals are difficult to compound. I can tell you they are not difficult. They're practically the same exact way to compound as every other drug that we make.
Even if they did, what you just said could be a basis for a lawsuit. Okay, second, what is the % chance that Congress, now this is a different thing, I'll give a slight background for the audience. I know that you know it. What is the %, I'll give you the question and the background for the audience. What is the % chance that Congress requires FDA to enforce the 5% restriction on interstate shipments for 503A compounders? This is known as the 5% rule. For those who don't know the background, this is something that's included in the law governing 503As. The law as written says that FDA is supposed to enforce this 5% restriction, but in those states where an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, has not yet been signed, in practical terms, this thing's been around for years. The FDA has tried several times to put together a memorandum of understanding. There have been lawsuits, it's been stalled. And FDA, in lieu of the MOUs coming together, has never enforced this 5% rule before. So if they started to enforce it, this would be something new that they have not done for several years. But in theory, they could do so. And in fact, Peter Pitts thinks that they should and that they will. What do you think? What's the % chance?
Yeah, I mean, the MOU has been going on for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
It's been proposed, and at the end of the day, what's the purpose of the MOU? The purpose is to make sure that there aren't large compounding pharmacies like NECC that are mass distributing drugs in interstate commerce and harming patients without the FDA knowing about it. So, that's kind of been solved by states telling each other, hey, this pharmacy is sending lots of drugs into another state. And at the same time, the FDA is made aware of this through the federal adverse events reporting system, FAERS. So, and then let's add some complications next. I mean, the states would all have to agree on the MOU. And if they don't, if they agree, they get that 5% becomes 50%. If they don't agree, 5%. Well, how is that in the best interest of patients? Right. Now they're stuck to getting their medications from a tiny compounding pharmacy in their own neighborhood because the one across the state lines wouldn't agree. That just happens to be the largest, most advanced compounding pharmacy in the country. Like, how is that serving patients' best interest? How is that actually improving quality? It actually does the opposite. It forces patients to use a compounding pharmacy within their own state. So, and the chances of that pharmacy in that state, that patient in that state, just happen to be in the same state as the most advanced compounding pharmacy in the nation, it's 1 in 50 chance, more or less. So, right. Yeah. So, I mean, the MOU, the states haven't agreed to it. There's always complications. I mean, what happens if you're a patient that's in a neighboring state that lives on the border of a neighboring state, and the pharmacy that you're used to going to for 50 years, is in a state that won't sign the MOU? what, now you can't cross 5 miles. You can't go 5 miles to get your prescription. Like, none of it makes sense. And this is why.
Held things up until now.
Yeah.
I have a quick time check to do, and then
we're over time. Sorry, but how are you on time, Shaun? Do you need?
Yeah, for sure. I dedicated a few extra minutes to this, so take all the time you need. Great question.
All right, well, it won't be more
Let's
than
do
10
2 or
minutes,
3 minutes, but that'll be it.
Oh, 2 or 3. Okay.
Minutes. That's it.
All right, we'll make this quick. And I did have a couple of really quick follow-ups, but I'm going to abide by this time restriction. So quickly, if you can, this is another one that Peter Pitts threw out there. I won't give the detailed background. What is the % chance that the FDA and the Customs Border Patrol enforces new restrictions on illicit foreign API?
So I think they're already doing it. I mean, if it's illicit, it shouldn't be coming in the country in the first place. And the fact that, we have there are reports, we know there are compounding pharmacies importing drugs that have never been FDA approved, and the FDA allowing that. The fact that the probability that they would not allow the importation of legal drugs, I find that the probability highly low. And let's say they did do that theoretically, which I seriously doubt they will. That would just mean that there would be API manufacturers here within the United States that would then be able to supply those drugs. So the probability now that, since the shortage has been going on for several years, I mean, there are dozens, close to 100 different API manufacturers that make tirzepatide and semaglutide and are importing them to our country. And, we have not seen any indication that the FDA is going to stop that.
Jonathan, I've got 2 1-minute follow-ups.
Let's do it.
All right. Quick 1-minute follow-up.
Sean may drop right in the middle of them, but yes.
Okay. So my theory, which may or may not be true, is that a lot of this is really tied back to these MFN negotiations between Novo, Lilly, the various other pharma companies, and the administration. If Novo and Lilly are willing to cut a deal that makes the administration happy, they'll try to do something to do on pharma, on compounding, because I'm pretty sure Novo and Lilly will ask for that. What's the % chance that the administration, despite everything you just said, decides to make things difficult for compounders as part of some deal on MFN? 1 minute or less.
Yeah, so to talk about the theoretical probability on something that hasn't happened yet, it's difficult.
Right.
But if I want to put a number out there, maybe 20%. Okay. I think that first thing, I doubt the pharmaceutical manufacturers will lower their costs here in the United States lower than anywhere else in the world.
Well, they can't go back into shortage, right? So that's a limit.
Right. And then at the same time, even if they were to drug semaglutide or tirzepatide at, let's say, $170, still the vast majority of the US population wouldn't be able to afford it. So that isn't really a win.
All right. I said I'd keep you to a minute. So we're going to go with 20%. My last 1-minute follow-up, although this could be a whole episode probably by itself, so I know I'm asking a lot. Earlier, you talked about your lawsuit. I didn't quite catch this. I just want to see if you can give a quick follow-up. Why, in your view, are tirzepatide and or semaglutide vulnerable to a patent change? Why are they not patentable? What is the key argument that makes them vulnerable? Why isn't Novo doing this?
Well, I can't speak for Novo.
Okay. Or then how about yours?
I can definitely speak for Lilly. I mean, these tirzepatide is not novel. It was,
not novel.
Yeah, they knew about it back in 2011. They filed a patent covering the operational unit of the GLP-GIP dual agonist with a synthetic tail. And it wasn't until 2015 that they got their provisional patent. Right. And, but they didn't mention that they knew about this back in 2011. Why? Well, it could be so they could extend their patent for another 4 years and get market exclusivity. So, I mean, that's not right. That's not the way the system works. They should have disclosed this. So we'll see what the USPTO says about it.
I think that's the same thing that applies to Novo. So I just wanted some clarity there. Short version is they're potentially vulnerable.
Right.
All right, Jonathan. Those are my follow-ups.
Let's wrap here. You've been extraordinarily generous. We're over time, big time. So thank you, Shaun, for being a part of Him's House. Final thing I'll say. was on your LinkedIn. Looks like you went to the University of Texas. You guys are #1 in the nation headed into the season. I'm from Texas. Sort of a fan.
Football?
Yeah, this is college football, Patrick. Just wanted to wish Texas well and say hook 'em horns before we left you.
There you go. Hook 'em. Thanks a bunch, and a lot of great things. Very lucky to be here in our great state of Texas. A lot of good things happening here, and a lot of great things happening on your side of the water as well. So thank you for educating patients, providers, all the different stakeholders when it comes to this very important conversation. And really looking forward to seeing what happens next.
Cool. Thank you again, Shaun.
Awesome. Thank you.